Welcome back to the news at 10. The management of Pinnacle Communications has condemned the invasion of their premises by men suspected to be officials of the Independent Corrupt Practices and Other Related Offences Commission, describing the action as unwarranted and illegal. The lead counsel to the organization, Mr. Abayomi Oyelola, appeals to the ICPC chairman and the Attorney General of the Federation to prevail on officers of the Commission to comply with the existing laws as they carry out their duties. The managements of Pinnacle Communications and the ICPC have been in a legal battle over an alleged misappropriation of the federal government's 2.5 billion naira meant for the digital switchover.
Pinnacle Communications condemns in very strong terms the illegal attempt by ICPC in the purported exercise of their power under the law to harass and intimidate Pinnacle's Communication Limited and its officials. The actions of ICPC further confirms that they have been on a witch hunt. We urge the chairman, Professor Bolaji Owasanye, who is a legal icon himself, and who we expect is honorable enough to rein in his officers and ensure that they comply with the rule of law and forestall actions that could further sink the image of the Commission. We are also urging, through this medium, the Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice, Malam Abubakar Malami, SAN, to swiftly check the excesses and the unwanton display of power by ICPC, and urge him to investigate this matter with a view to deflating the obvious display of prejudice, hatred, and acrimony in the agencies.
The Registrar of the Joint Admissions and Matriculation Board, Professor Ishaq Oyoloyede, is warning service providers against exploiting candidates preparing for the 2020 Unified Tertiary Matriculation exams. Professor Oyoloyede frowned on JAMB service providers who allegedly extort potential candidates by inflating the cost of the forms beyond the officially approved cost. He, however, appeals to candidates to report cases of extortion and exploitation, as the board is prepared to prosecute service providers found guilty of perpetrating fraud through the sale of forms. He was speaking to officers and men of the Nigeria Security and Civil Defense Corps in Abuja and other service providers. We move on now. Nigeria has signed a memorandum of understanding with the developing 8 countries to host a program office of its Health and Social Protection Program in the nation's capital, Abuja. After a closed-door meeting with the Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, the Secretary General of the D8 told State House correspondents that the year 2020 affords the organization an opportunity to expand their areas of cooperation among member countries. Our correspondent, Kayla Mengwa, reports.
Formed in 1997, the Developing 8 seeks development cooperation among member countries, namely Bangladesh, Egypt, Indonesia, Iran, Malaysia, Nigeria, Pakistan, and Turkey, to improve the standard of living of its people while positioning the countries in the global economy through programs such as the Health and Social Protection Program, which member countries have decided Nigeria should host.
I wish to reaffirm Nigeria's commitment in ensuring the success of this initiative, as well as our willingness to collaborate with other member states and other stakeholders in ensuring that our citizens receive access to affordable health care and robust social protection.
The delegation, led by the Secretary General of the D8, later paid a visit to Vice President Yemi Osinbajo to update him on the status of the signed Memorandum of Understanding and plans to expand areas of cooperation in Nigeria in areas of trade and industry.
The government of Nigeria has agreed to provide us with facility and some funding, to start the program. while we are working with other organizations to also support us in terms of funding, we are working with the member state also to support, in making this a successful story in the health sector. But this agreement, headquarters agreement, says that we will have our presence here in Nigeria.
We are also looking at departing from the usual, depending on aids to trade. We want to move from aids to trade. You all know that there is donor fatigue in terms of funding programs for health sector. So what we are doing is to see how we can enhance trading between the member countries.
As the D8 prepares for its 10th summit holding in Bangladesh for 2020, it is hoped that its goal redirection will ensure member states reduce poverty and inequality, as well as boost healthcare delivery. Kayla Magwa, Channels Television News.
Let's take a look at some business news now, and here's Anne Wilder.
Banking so easy, so simple. Dial *894# now to experience it. You first, First Bank.
Thank you, Ijoma. Welcome to Business News. We begin with Nigeria emerging as one of the gainers of about £6.5 billion in business deals signed at the UK Africa Investment Summit held in London. According to a statement by the UK government, the multi-billion-pounds deal was signed with several popular British firms such as GlaxoSmithKline and Diageo, in addition to over £1.5 billion of aid-funded initiatives expected to create hundreds of thousands of jobs. The UK also announced the new initiatives to enable African countries transform their economies, increase infrastructure financing, achieve its clean energy potential, and launch a new major partnership with the City of London. Meanwhile, the UK plans to set up a Nigeria regulatory sandbox to support local fintech firms, as well as a new facility to improve and manage government infrastructure with funds worth £80 million. Oh, that's the sound of the closing gong at the Nigerian Stock Exchange, rung by the new president of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Mrs. Toke Mabogunje, signifying the close of trading for today. Speaking after the association made the courtesy visit to the exchange, Mrs. Mabogunje, who was accompanied by the management team of the LCCI, commended the NSE for the rally recorded in Nigeria's equities market so far from the start of this year. The new helmsman of the Commerce Chamber also praised market operators for some of the improvements made to ease transactions for investors within the market.
What I want to do is to quickly felicitate with all of you on the rallying that's been going on this month of January and the improvements in the market. 10%, like I say, is no joke. And I think that you have all worked very hard to deserve this. And I was also saying that my prayer is that we may be able to sustain it. So we've actually gone from being the worst performing bourse to being ahead of the pack. Let us remain champions on the market. Let us remain champions.
And talking about the market, renewed profit-taking from two major counters of the NSE pulled the stock market back from its recent bull run by a moderate margin. Let's hear more from Layo Adegoke.
Hello and welcome to the Stock Market Report. The Nigerian stock market ended Tuesday's session negative by 0.83% as a result of profit-taking on bellwether components of banking and industrial goods. The 127 billion naira loss on the overall market cap is attributed to declines in the share price of GT Bank, Access and Zenith, which dragged the banking index down by 3.58%, while losses from industrial goods giants of Dangote Cement and Boa Cement led to 0.45% decline in the sector. Overall volume of shares traded today were higher compared to Monday's session as 272.83 million shares worth 3.7 billion naira were traded in almost 5,000 deals. Tier 1 lenders Zenith, Access and UBA were top on the list of most traded stocks in the market, and these are the top gainers and losers on today's trading. Well, that's it on the Stock Market Report. I'm Layo Adegoki.
Thank you, Layo. Well, as for major global equities, they have entered today's trading mostly lower. Investors are still reacting to Hong Kong's rating cut by Moody's rating agency. Let's see the closing figures for today. And with those red numbers, we end business news for tonight. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Anne Nwawado. The rest of the news at 10 continues now with Ijoma.
Banking so easy, so simple. Dial star 894 hash now to experience it. You first, First Bank.
Thanks a lot, Anne. While the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention is expected to announce that the first case of the Wuhan coronavirus has been reported in the United States, China's top leaders have been warning junior officials not to cover up the spread of the virus. Here's Simon Pusey with more in Around the World in 5.
Good evening from the Channel's newsroom here in London. US President Donald Trump has criticised climate activists in a keynote speech at the World Economic Forum in Davos in Switzerland. Trump, who pulled out of the meetings last year, arrived by helicopter as his impeachment trial back home got underway. The president used the platform where sustainability is the main theme to decry climate prophets of doom and called for a rejection of predictions of the apocalypse.
This is not a time for pessimism. This is a time for optimism. Fear and doubt is not a good thought process, because this is a time for tremendous hope and joy and optimism and action. But to embrace the possibilities of tomorrow, we must reject the perennial prophets of doom and their predictions of the apocalypse.
He didn't refer to her by name, but the Swedish teen climate activist Greta Thunberg was in the audience, and later she took to the stage, blaming politicians for not doing enough to counter CO2 emissions.
No political ideology or economic structure has been able to tackle the climate and environmental emergency and create a cohesive and sustainable world. Because that world, in case you haven't noticed, is currently on fire.
China's top leaders have warned lower-level officials not to cover up the spread of a new coronavirus that has now infected nearly 300 people. The warning came as state media said 6 people had now died from the virus, which causes a type of pneumonia. It's been confirmed the virus can pass from person to person. The World Health Organization will consider declaring an international public health emergency over the virus, as it did with swine flu and Ebola. Such a declaration, if made, will be seen as an urgent call for a coordinated international response. Hundreds of migrants who waded across a river on Mexico's southern border have been stopped from entering the country on their way to the US. The migrants, mainly from Honduras, took to the water after being refused permission to cross a nearby bridge. Mexico has cut off migration routes to the US under pressure from President Donald Trump. National Guard troops with riot shields were seen trying to stop the migrants from climbing the banks of the river, which marks the border between Mexico and Guatemala. 9 people injured in a bomb attack in Somalia, including 3 Turkish nationals, have been flown to Turkey for medical treatment. The suicide car bombing by Islamist group Al-Shabaab occurred on Saturday in Ifgoye, about 30 kilometers northwest of the capital, and targeted Turkish construction workers who were having lunch with police. A total of 21 people were injured in the attack. The East Libyan military commander Khalifa Haftar has met with German Chancellor Angela Merkel and French President Emmanuel Macron on the sidelines of a summit in Berlin. The commander shook hands with the French president before sitting down for talks after world leaders, including Russia's Vladimir Putin and Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan, called on him to end his aggressive stance. US Secretary of State was upbeat after the meetings about a lasting peace deal.
We had most of the parties who have the capacity to improve the lives for the Libyan people. There was progress made towards a full-fledged ceasefire, a truce, temporary stand-down. There's still a lot of work to do. It's a complicated battlefield, but you had President Erdogan, President Putin, Chancellor Merkel, all making a sincere commitment.
Thousands of gun rights supporters have converged on the center of the U.S. city of Richmond to protest against tighter gun laws in the state of Virginia. Many people arrived in the state capital openly carrying an assortment of firearms, including assault rifles. Security is tight and a cordon is in force around the state legislature, where guns cannot be carried. Virginia's gun laws had been seen as permissive, but Democratic lawmakers passed restrictions in January. This angered gun rights activists, many making long trips from other US states to attend the rally. And finally, an attempt to set a world record in Sri Lanka for the largest gathering of twins appears to have failed after too many turned up. Thousands gathered to take part in the event after organisers called on the island's twins to gather at a sports stadium in the capital Colombo to try to break Taiwan's Guinness World Record set in 1999. The record then was 3,961 pairs of twins, 37 sets of triplets and 4 sets of quadruplets together in one place. But a bigger than expected crowd flocked to the stadium, causing long queues and meaning strict rules on registration were hindered. Arbitrators Guinness World Records did not respond to a request for comment on whether the record had been broken. And that's your international news around the world in 5.
Thanks a lot, Simon. Still ahead on the news at 10, Super Eagles of Nigeria drawn in favourable group with Cape Verde, Central African Republic and Liberia in the African qualifying series for the 2022 FIFA World Cup. That's on sports. Do join us again.